Hey everyone, it's Jessica. Have you felt stressed out lately? Whether it's chronic illness or just everyday life, life is full of stress. And one of the ways I've unwinded recently is by getting lost in a good story. So these are three books I recommend for unwinding. The first is called Inheritance by Dani Schapiro. It's a best selling memoir. The second is another best-selling book, a novel, Pachinko, by Min Jee Lee. And the third book I want to review is Saint Malo. Shoot, what was that fell down? Saint Malo by Larry Mollin. So let me do the first book. The first book I read on an electronic device, so I don't have a physical copy of it with me. That's why I printed out the cover. This is an amazing, wow, this was one of the most shocking and beautiful memoirs I've ever read. So, Dani Schapiro, even before Inheritance, was already a best selling author. And the gist of it is at the age of 54, Dani finds out shocking news that rocks her world. And it goes to the question of identity. And it's the kind of thing most people can only imagine. So, she grew up, Dani Schapiro, close to her father. Her Jewish heritage is very important to her. And so one day her husband is sending in, those ancestry DNA, whatever it is. I've never done it, but those kits where you send in some, and then you get back, you learn about your genealogy, all of that. So her husband is sending in a kit for himself, and he says, "Hey, do you want to do one too? I can send one in for you." And she's like, "Sure, whatever." And so he does. And then the results of Dani's test comes back, and it's shocking. So she is now 54 years old. You've lived your whole life with a sense of identity, and that whole thing is questioned. And she cannot ask her parents her questions because both of them have been gone for many years. So now I want to stop here. This is where the book, everything goes on a wild ride, this revelation. And I don't want to give it away, so I got to stop. I've never experienced anything similar to what Dani has experienced. So I do think that with the way science and technology is going, this kind of situation would be more common in the future for future generations. I've never met the author, so nobody requested that I do this book review or anything like that. Well, nobody's requested that I do reviews for any of these books. They're just books I bought that I like. But yeah, this was a really, really shocking, wow. This news that she gets and how she writes so beautifully too. That's the thing. She has a great story to tell, but Dani is also just a great writer. Now, the second book I'm reviewing, it's a bigger, it's called, here's another New York Times bestseller. It's by Min Jee Lee, and it's called Pachinko. So this is a novel. This is fictional. And I would say read it for the writing, not to expect some happy ending. But, the first line of this book says, "History has failed us, but no matter." This book has received a lot of praise, and I can already see that it will be taught in schools alongside books like To Kill a Mockingbird or A Tale of Two Cities. It follows the story of this Japanese family from the early 1900s all the way up through the late 1980s, and how major events in history, including 2 world wars, have shaped their lives and their destiny. So we see this family. What is so impressive about the book is how Min Jee Lee is able to take us through a journey of multiple generations of one family. So because of World War II, this Japanese family is transplanted to Korea. They're forced to deal with lots of anti-Japanese discrimination for decades. And as I was reading it, I thought, wow, this book is just so relevant to, sadly, what's going on today with the AAPI hate crimes during this pandemic. Tragedy is supposed to bring out the best of us, but a lot of times it brings out the worst in some people. So the themes are very relevant to what's going on today with the hate crimes against Asians, AAP, Asian American Pacific Islanders. So then I don't want to give it away because I have a lot of praise for Pachinko, but then how do I praise it without giving away the plot, right? So the name of the main character is Sunja. We meet her when she's a teenager, and she's the daughter of a disabled fisherman. She meets an older, wealthier man, and meeting him changes her life forever. So let's see. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but if there's just one suggestion I would add, it's this: that we don't know where people are coming from. And so people have all kinds of different traumatic experiences that we carry around with us. So at the same time, I sympathize with authors because they don't want to spoil their book, and I don't want them to spoil it either. I know I sympathize with them. So one thing I would say is that there is some content regarding suicide and suicide loss. I would have preferred, as somebody who's lost multiple people I love to suicide, to have just a brief content warning at the beginning of the book before it started so I could mentally prepare myself. But even then, regardless, I would have read the book anyway. It's a beautifully written book. I would have liked to not be caught off guard just because of, and people have different experiences, right? So somebody may not, that may not be an issue for them, but maybe something else. There's experiences that other people have had that I haven't had, and I sympathize with them because I know what it's like. So that's just one thing I would say, a content warning. And again, I don't want people to, like, and I'm not trying to censor authors or anything like that. So Pachinko is a big book, and if you want to sink yourself into a long story, this is a good one. Now, in contrast, the third and final book is Saint Malo by Larry Mollin, playwright Larry Mollin. Any 90210 fans out there? Any fans of the iconic 90s TV show? So Larry was one of the writers of Beverly Hills 90210 during the good seasons. Now, this is a short novel. It's an adventure novel, and at times it reminded me of Indiana Jones. And what's great about a short novel is if you have brain fog. So some people with chronic illness tell me they have brain fog, and it's hard to read a long book. Or if you have fatigue, right? So short is good in that case because you don't have to worry about so many interruptions taking you away, and you're not like, what did I just read again? I forgot. So this is a good book. It's not related to 90210, but like I said, at times it reminded me of Indiana Jones. It's fictional. The main character, Max Dean, is a freelance songwriter and private eye. He has just survived a bout with cancer and a divorce from the love of his life, and he hunts pirate treasure, and a client hires him to find buried booty. So he winds up in the sea caves of St. Malo, and the treasure he is hunting for has eluded many men and women for centuries who have searched for this treasure. And let's see. So he winds up in St. Malo, which I found out is a city in northern France. And the tagline at the back of the novel, the book jacket, says, "To survive his vacation on the coast of Brittany, Max will need the talents of the love of his life who left him, a heroin-addicted surfer, and a Parisian street Romeo. Murder, mayhem, and making love ensues in a wild search for untold riches and much, much more." I'll repeat that since I butchered it. Murder, mayhem, and making love ensues in a wild search for untold riches and much, much more. So, interesting story. How I met Larry is, so I'm a Beverly Hills 90210 fan, and last year this podcast which became wildly successful, the Beverly Hills 90210 show podcast, which is also on YouTube, started, and I was watching, and so that's how I met him. And then, so he's a great guy. He's, there's a lot of kissing ass in Hollywood, no offense. And Larry's not one of those guys. He's really sincere. He tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter. And he's very talented. He has many talents. So I do recommend this book. I just want to give one suggestion, similar to Pachinko, but a little bit different. So again, we don't know where people are coming from. People carry trauma around with us because some experiences you never forget. And this has not happened to me personally, but a lot of people have experienced sexual assault. Unfortunately, it's a common problem in our society, and one of the stories in this book involves a sudden scene of sexual assault. So I would just suggest having a content warning at the beginning of the book before the plot starts, so that way we don't spoil anything, but at the same time, people have a chance to make informed decisions, readers, or mentally prepare themselves. So, like a friend of mine said, she said that as a sexual assault survivor, she doesn't have a problem reading something that has sexual assault in it. She just wants a little a heads up at the beginning so she can mentally prepare herself. And like I said, that's kind of how I feel about suicide storylines. So I empathize with survivors of assault because even though it hasn't happened to me, I know what it's like to be surprised by an experience that has happened to you when you're watching a TV show or reading a book. And again, I'm not advocating for censorship, and I wouldn't give reviews of these books if I didn't have a positive impression of them. I would just not talk about them because that's how I am. So again, the three books are Dani Schapiro's Inheritance, a memoir of genealogy, paternity, and love. Second, Min Jee Lee's Pachinko. And third, and finally, Saint Malo by Larry Mollin. I should say there's a sequel, so this is the first in a trilogy. It's in a series. The sequel is called Cayuga. I believe that's it. So I believe that's the name. I'm going to post a link to all three of these books plus the sequel to Larry's book in the description box. And I bought all of these books on my own. Nobody asked me to do a review. So let me know, what's your favorite genre of books? Sometimes do you find yourself escaping in a story? Do you prefer memoirs? Do you like fiction? I hope everyone's doing well. Bye.